The jigi was wrong on Wednesday. Not wrong the way food goes wrong. Nothing was burnt, nothing was missing, nothing was technically incorrect. It was wrong the way a room is wrong when someone has rearranged the furniture in the night. Everything in the right place. Something fundamentally absent. Nobody said anything. They ate. 32 people sat at various tables in Baek Ji-ho's household that Wednesday. 32 people noticed. Not one of them said a word. This tells you everything you need to know about the house. And everything you need to know about what Mara Washington meant to it. Mara didn't quit. She just stopped showing up. There's a difference. She would like that distinction acknowledged. Before we go any further, if you are the kind of person who likes stories that make you laugh out loud and then quietly rearrange something in your chest, this is exactly the kind of story you've been looking for. Every story told here is built like this one. Character first. Comedy on top. Something real underneath. So before Mara stirs another pot and Ji-ho makes another terrible decision in an expensive suit, subscribe right now. Turn on notifications. Because when this story ends, you are going to want the next one immediately. And drop a comment right now. Just tell us. Are you a Mara or a Ji-ho? Do you leave before you can be left? Or do you build a billboard and hope nobody notices what it actually means? Every single comment gets read. Now, let's go. Mara Elaine Washington. 28 years old. Memphis born. Grandmother raised. The kind of woman who walks into a room and immediately knows the nearest exit, the most incompetent person present, and whether the food is worth eating in exactly that order. She moved to the city at 21 with a plan. Save money, send some home, figure out the rest later. The job with Mr. Beck came through a staffing agency that described the position as, and the wording deserves appreciation, private household chef and domestic coordinator for a high-profile client. She found out about the crime thing on day 3. She asked for a raise on day 4. She got it. She stayed for 11 years. Not because she was scared. Not because she had nowhere else to go. Because the work was consistent, the pay was good, and Baek Ji-ho, for all his terrifying reputation, had never once, in 11 years, spoken to her with anything less than basic human respect. She respected that. She never said so, but she filed it the way she filed everything, in the back of her mind where she kept information that mattered. She was not flashy. She didn't give notice, didn't call, didn't send an email. The following Tuesday she woke up, made coffee, and went to ceramics instead of work. Wednesday she went to ceramics again. Thursday she started a food blog she'd been meaning to start for 2 years, and uploaded a slow-motion video of herself making cornbread with the caption, "Sometimes you just need to make something with your hands." She didn't look at the camera. She never looked at the camera. The jigi was wrong on Wednesday. Now, Baek Ji-ho, 38 years old. Feared crime lord. Owner of 1717 legitimate dry cleaning businesses, which is either extremely suspicious or the most ambitious laundering operation the city has ever seen, and nobody is asking follow-up questions. He has, on one documented occasion, made a rival cry by raising a single eyebrow. Just one. He didn't even use both. He took over his family's organization at 26 after his father's abrupt retirement, which everyone called a retirement and nobody discussed further. He was considered too young, too cold, too controlled. He turned all 3 of those criticisms into architecture. He built something airtight and efficient and feared, and he did it by being the most disciplined person in any given room at any given time under any given pressure. He didn't drink heavily, didn't gamble, didn't make impulsive decisions. His organization ran on precision and his household ran on precision, and the jigi, specifically Mara's jigi, was, for reasons he had never been able to fully articulate, the one thing in his life that felt exactly right. He didn't know why. He had theories. He kept them in a drawer, locked. When Mara didn't come back on Wednesday, Ji-ho spent the first 2 hours assuming she was sick. By hour 4 he was mildly concerned. By hour 6 he had sent Dae-young to check on her. Dae-young, his enforcer, a man built like a refrigerator with a man bun, the person you sent when you needed a situation resolved without residual paperwork, came back looking confused. "She's at a ceramics class, sir." "A what?" "Ceramics. Like pottery. She's making bowls." Ji-ho absorbed this. "When will she be back?" "She's enrolled in the full 12-week course." Silence. "She's not coming back today?" "She's not coming back at all, sir. From what I can gather." More silence. The kind of silence that has texture. Find out what she needs, Jiho said finally, and fix it. She doesn't seem to need anything fixed, sir. She seems good. Then find out what she wants. Sir. Dae-young chose his words with the care of a man crossing a minefield in expensive shoes. I don't think this is a problem that gets fixed. I think she just left. Jiho looked at him for a long moment. Everyone, he said, with a quiet precision that made Dae-young want to take 2 steps backward. Want something? Yes, sir. Find out what it is. Yes, sir. Dae-young left. Jiho sat at his desk and looked at the door she hadn't come through and felt something he didn't have a name for yet and filed it in the same drawer as his theories. The drawer had a combination. He was the only one who knew it. Meanwhile, in the kitchen, 11 years of institutional knowledge had evaporated overnight. The head cook, a nervous man named Young-soo who had been hired specifically as backup and had never been expected to actually cook, stood in front of the stove looking at the ingredients like a man reading a document in a foreign language. He had the recipe. He had followed the recipe. He had the kimchi, the pork belly, the broth, the gochugaru in the correct proportions. He had done everything correctly. Tasted wrong. He tasted it again to confirm. Still wrong. He made it again from scratch. Wrong. He went home that night and made it in his own kitchen. Wrong, wrong, wrong. He texted the consigliere. I can't figure out what she was doing differently. The consigliere, a measured, deeply professional man named Dimitri, who managed the international side of Mr. Beck's affairs with the composure of a diplomat, texted back. Neither can I. I've been trying since Tuesday. Then, after a pause, do you think it was something in the base? Young-soo. Has to be. But I can't isolate it. Dimitri. I'll try a different broth tomorrow. This is how it started. 2 grown men, both employed by a criminal organization, texting each other at 11 o'clock at night about soup. By the end of the first week, 6 people were in the group chat. By the end of the second week, it was 11. Dae-young eventually spent $300 at a Korean grocery store, came home, cooked for 4 hours, tasted the result, and sat down on his kitchen floor. Tasted like regret in a pot. He did not share this with the group chat. He sat on his kitchen floor for a while longer. Then he picked up his phone and texted, I think she was adding something we don't have access to. The consigliere, who had 47 failed attempts documented in a leather notebook by this point, replied immediately, obviously. The question is what? Nobody knew. Nobody had ever thought to ask her. For 11 years, nobody had asked. 8 months before Mara quit, Mr. Beck had called her into his office. Not the kitchen. The office. Leather chairs. City view. 2 men standing by the door whose entire professional purpose was to make people feel that leaving was not currently an option. He sat across from her, folded his hands on the desk with the deliberate precision of a man arranging evidence, and said, with the gravity of someone announcing the beginning of a geopolitical crisis, You changed something. Mara blinked. Excuse me? The Jigi, 2019. Sometime in March. You changed something and I need to know what it was. She stared at him. He had been sitting on this information for 4 years. He had a folder. There was a timeline inside it. A printed, organized, dated timeline of Jigi-related observations spanning nearly a decade, with specific notations about texture, heat distribution, and, she was reading this correctly, emotional resonance. Emotional resonance. In a food quality assessment. In a locked folder. In an office with armed security. She told him nothing. Not because it was a secret worth keeping. It was smoked paprika and her grandmother's hot sauce. It had taken 30 seconds. She could have told him right then, and the whole meeting would have been over in under a minute and everyone could have gotten on with their day. But he had called her into his office with 2 men by the door to interrogate her about soup. And something in Mara, something bone-deep and grandmother-shaped, refused to reward this behavior. I don't know what you're talking about. Mara. Sir. He looked at her for a moment. Then he slid a piece of paper across the desk. It was a graph. A hand-drawn graph, on actual graph paper, with a legend, charting what was labeled at the top in small, precise handwriting as Jigi Satisfaction Index, 2013 present. There was a baseline. There were quarterly data points. There was a clear, dramatic spike in March of 2019. And at the spike, in red ink, a note that read, Something shifted. Unauthorized. Unauthorized. He had classified her improving his soup as an unauthorized event. Mara looked at the graph. Looked at him. Looked at the graph again. She looked at it the way you look at something that makes you realize you have deeply underestimated a situation. She stood up. Smoothed her apron. I'll have lunch ready at 1. Mara. She walked out. He called after her. She did not turn around, did not slow down, did not give any indication that she had heard him, which they both knew was not true. She heard everything. She always heard everything. She just chose very deliberately what she responded to. He didn't eat lunch that day. He sat at his desk and stared at the graph and thought, with the focused patience of a man who had built an empire on his ability to wait for answers. De-Jong found him there at 7 p.m., still staring. Sir, do you want me to find out what she changed? Sir, I don't think. Find out what she changed. De-Jong. Yes, sir. De-Jong spent 3 weeks on this. He asked Young-soo. He asked the junior kitchen staff. He reviewed delivery receipts for any unusual ingredients. He considered briefly and then dismissed the possibility of hiring a food chemist. He found nothing. The graph went back into the folder. The folder went into the drawer. The drawer was locked. This was 8 months before she left. And looking back, which is the only way you can ever see these things clearly, it was also the moment that set everything else in motion. Because after the office meeting, something shifted in Mara too. Not anger. She wasn't angry. She was something quieter and more clarifying than anger. She was tired in a specific way she hadn't been tired before. Tired of being the most noticed person in the room in every way except the one that mattered. He noticed the soup changed. He did not ask if she was okay. He never asked if she was okay. Not once. In 11 years. She went home that night and looked up ceramics classes. She didn't sign up for 3 more months. But she looked. Then there was the Tuesday incident. This one happened about 6 weeks before she left, and it is important to understand the rule about the kitchen before understanding why this particular Tuesday broke something open. The rule was simple. The kitchen was Mara's. Not contractually. Not in writing. Enforced entirely by Mara's expression and the collective survival instinct of everyone who worked in the house. Mr. Beck had stood in the kitchen doorway exactly 4 times in 11 years. He had looked in. He had never crossed the threshold. This was understood. This was respected. This was, in the unspoken social architecture of the household, as close to sacred law as anything got. He crossed the threshold. Mara was dicing onions. He walked in, stood behind her left shoulder, looked at the cutting board, and before any higher brain function could review and possibly veto the decision, said, "That's not how you dice an onion." The kitchen went silent. Young-soo, who was standing by the stove, did not move. 2 junior staff members physically backed toward the wall. Not because they were told to, because the room had a pressure in it suddenly, the particular pressure of something that has been perfectly balanced for a very long time shifting 1 degree in the wrong direction. Mara set down her knife. Slowly, she turned around. She looked at him with the full, unhurried attention of a woman who is calculating, in real time, whether the number on her paycheck is large enough to cover this specific moment. "I'm sorry. The cuts. You're going horizontal first. You should go vertical then horizontal. More uniform pieces. I have been dicing onions," Mara said, "since I was 7 years old. And yet," he gestured with what he clearly considered to be helpful specificity, at the cutting board. What followed was 11 full minutes of Baek Ji-ho, a man who had not successfully cooked a meal since 2015 and who had, during that attempt, managed to burn water explaining knife technique to a woman who had been feeding 30 people 3 times a day for 11 years. He explained grip. He explained angle. He explained the geometry of uniform dice and why it mattered for even cooking. He was thorough. He was precise. He cited, at one point, a technique he had read about, which meant he had been reading about knife technique, which meant he had opinions about knife technique, which he had apparently been holding in reserve until this exact Tuesday. Mara let him finish. Every word. She did not interrupt. Did not argue. Did not let a single thing she was feeling cross her face. She stood with her hands at her sides and listened to the entire presentation with the polite, closed expression of a woman who has made a decision she hasn't announced yet. Then she picked up her knife. and diced the remaining onion in exactly the same way she had been doing it before. The food will be ready at 1. He opened his mouth, closed it. He left the kitchen. The jjigae that afternoon was the best it had ever tasted. Every single person at the table noticed. The flavor was deeper, the balance more complex. There was something in it that day that hadn't been there before and would not be there again. Nobody said anything. Mr. Beck ate 2 bowls and spent the rest of the afternoon in a complicated emotional state that he could not name and refused to examine. That night, Mara went home and signed up for the ceramics class. She did not connect these 2 events. She was wrong not to. And then 3 weeks after she stopped showing up, Mara makes it went viral. Not because of strategy. Not because of planning or optimization or any of the things people talk about when they talk about growing an audience. She had posted 1 video. Slow motion. Herself making cornbread, pouring the batter into a cast iron skillet that had belonged to her grandmother. Not looking at the camera, not performing anything, just making something the way she had always made things, with her whole attention and her whole body and the particular unhurried ease of someone who has been doing this since they were small. Caption. Sometimes you just need to make something with your hands. 40,000 shares in 48 hours. Comments flooding in like a tide. She is somebody's auntie and I need her in my life. This woman is healing something I didn't know was broken. I don't know who she is, but I trust her completely, and I would like her to be my emergency contact. Dae-young, who had been monitoring the blog for what he was calling reconnaissance purposes, and what was actually just watching it repeatedly, walked into Mr. Beck's office with the look of a man delivering news he has pre-braced himself to deliver. Sir. She posted the braised short rib recipe. Silence. Our braised short rib recipe? It has 200,000 views. The silence that followed was long enough for Dae-young to develop a small, specific anxiety. Get my legal team, Mr. Beck said. His legal team spent 4 hours explaining that he did not own the recipe, had never written it down, that it had originated with Mara's grandmother, been adapted by Mara over years of cooking, and been prepared by Mara in his house. That the recipe belonged to Mara in every legal, moral, and practical sense, and there was nothing, absolutely nothing, he could do about it. He did not accept this on an emotional level. He called her. She let it ring. He called again, and again. On the 5th call, she picked up with, I'm in class. And he said, you are posting our recipes on the internet. My recipes. The short rib is my grandmother's recipe that I adapted and cooked in your house for 6 years. It is my recipe. I ate that short rib for 6 years. Congratulations. She hung up. He stared at his phone. Then he looked at Dae-young, who had not left because he had correctly predicted this conversation would require follow-up. Is the cornbread video actually good? Dae-young, who had watched it 17 times. It's very good, sir. Mr. Beck watched the cornbread video. He watched it twice. She didn't look at the camera. She never looked at the camera. She was just making something and it was so completely, entirely, uncomplicatedly hers that he could not stop watching and he did not fully understand why. He put his phone face down on the desk. The cease and desist was quietly dropped. Nobody mentioned it again. The billboard went up on a Thursday. It was Jiho's idea and he made it happen in under 48 hours, which is the kind of efficiency that is deeply impressive and deeply alarming in equal measure. He had decided, with the full strategic confidence of a man who had never made an impulsive decision and therefore had no frame of reference for what one felt like from the inside, that this was a reasonable escalation. She was not returning his calls. She was not responding to Dae-young's politely worded outreach. She had incorporated his recipes into a food blog that was currently going viral. Something needed to be done. He commissioned a billboard. Downtown. Full size. A black and white photograph of Mara, pulled from the household staff ID files, which, already a problem, holding a mop with the expression she wore when she was deciding whether a situation merited a response. Bold text. Simple. Missing. Last seen Tuesday. Reward. Generous. He looked at the proof. Perfect, he said. It went up Thursday morning. By Thursday afternoon, 11 people had photographed it. By Friday morning, 4,000 people had shared those photographs. By Friday evening, a journalist at the city's second-largest newspaper had filed a story. The headline, which Mr. Beck read at 7 a.m. on Saturday while his coffee went cold, was, Korean crime ring targets black women. The disturbing story behind a downtown billboard. He did not eat breakfast. He called his PR team. His PR team called his legal team. His legal team called Dae-young. Dae-young walked into the office, set a printed copy of the article on the desk, and stood with the stillness of a man who has learned, through years of professional experience, that sometimes the most useful thing you can do is simply be present and not speak. Mr. Beck read the article. He read it again. "This is not accurate," he said. "No, sir. The characterization is completely—" "Yes, sir. I was attempting to locate an employee." "Sir." Dae-young paused. "There are also 3 women in the lobby." "What women?" "3 women named Mara. They've come about the reward." A silence. "They're not." "No, sir. None of them are Mara Washington." "Then why are they here?" "The billboard says Mara. Reward? Generous. They are named Mara. They would like the reward." Mr. Beck pressed 2 fingers to the bridge of his nose. "Send them home." "We tried, sir. One of them is 74 years old and she—" Dae-young appeared to search for the right phrasing. "She's made herself comfortable. She's asked if there's lunch." "There is not lunch." "Young-soo made soup, sir. She's had 2 bowls." Mr. Beck stood up and walked to the window and looked out at the city with the expression of a man watching something he built very carefully being disassembled by forces he does not fully understand. That was only the first day. By Saturday, Black Twitter had found the billboard. This is the part that cannot be fully described and must simply be acknowledged. The discourse was, by all accounts, immaculate. People who had seen the cornbread video and fallen in love with Mara Makes It were now encountering the billboard. The collision of these 2 pieces of information produced a cultural reaction of significant proportions. There were threads. There were video essays. Someone made a 16-minute documentary-style breakdown. Someone else made a song. The ceramics class, who had been following all of this with the delighted terror of people watching a wildfire from a safe distance, started selling mugs with Mara's face on them. They sold out in 48 hours. They restocked. Those sold out too. And then Patrick called. Patrick was the ceramics instructor. He was a gentleman who had never experienced professional conflict stronger than a disagreement about glaze opacity. He was also, in his non-pottery professional life, a copyright lawyer. He called Mara, who was sitting at her kitchen table reading the Black Twitter threads with the focused calm of someone watching a situation she did not cause but finds deeply satisfying, and explained that the photograph on the billboard had been used without her consent, that she had significant legal standing, and that he would like, with her permission, to make a phone call. "Make the call, Patrick," she said. Patrick made the call. Mara's cousin Renee, who was a better lawyer than Patrick and had been looking for a reason to be useful in this situation since she first saw the billboard on Friday, made a second call. By Sunday, Mr. Beck was being sued for the billboard rights to his own billboard about a woman he had employed using a photograph she had never consented to. His legal team spent the weekend on this. The 74-year-old Mara finally went home Saturday evening, but only after extracting a promise that the reward would be reconsidered, which nobody made because nobody with legal authority was available to make it, which she accepted with surprising grace and her 3rd bowl of Young-soo's soup. Eventually, through lawyers and counter-lawyers and a mediated conversation that Dae-young arranged through channels Dae-young did not explain, a meeting was set. Mara came alone. She wore her ceramics clothes. There was clay under one fingernail. She had not dressed for effect. She sat down across from Mr. Beck's desk in the leather chair, looked at the room. 2 men by the door, city view. The locked drawer she had always known was locked and waited. He asked her to come back. She negotiated. The first item was money. A 70% raise, effective immediately, backdated to the date she stopped coming in. He agreed in 30 seconds without changing expression. The second item was Tuesdays. Non-negotiable. No questions asked, no emergency exceptions, no calling her on a Tuesday for any reason regardless of the nature of the emergency. He paused for 15 seconds. Then done. The third item was benefits. Medical, dental, vision, the full arrangement, the kind usually reserved for full-time corporate employees, not household staff. He agreed before she finished the sentence. His consigliere, who was watching from the doorway, made a note in his phone that said simply, Tuesdays, and underlined it twice. The fourth item was the apology. Here he paused. The room held its breath. 30 seconds of silence that Dmitri would later describe, to his wife over dinner, as the loudest 30 seconds of his professional career. The apology, Mr. Beck said, will be issued personally. Another pause. It will be issued personally. Mara nodded once. She stood up, smoothed her jacket. She looked at him the way she had always looked at him. Clear, direct, entirely unbothered, and said, Tuesday is in 4 days. I'll see you Wednesday. She left. The room was very quiet. Dmitri looked at his notes, looked at the door, looked back at his notes, looked at the two men by the door who were looking at each other with the carefully blank expressions of people trying very hard not to have visible emotions at work. Sir, Dmitri said carefully. Did she just? Not a word. I wasn't going to say anything, I just… Dmitri. Not a word, sir. She went back to work on a Wednesday. The jiggy was right again on Thursday. Mr. Beck ate 2 bowls. Nobody mentioned it. It would have been better if someone had. But this was the house, and this was the way of the house, and everyone went back to their positions and performed normalcy with the dedication of people who have agreed, collectively, not to examine what just happened too closely. Except something had changed. And the thing about something having changed is that it doesn't announce itself. It doesn't arrive with a label. It just sits in the architecture of things and waits, and slowly, gradually, the structure around it shifts. Mara noticed it first. Not in him, in herself. She came back to work and the work was the same. The kitchen was hers and the routine was familiar and the jiggy was right and everything was technically unchanged. But she had spent 3 weeks making things with her hands that nobody needed. She had spent 3 weeks being looked at by people who saw her. Not the household she managed, not the food she made, just her, Mara, in a ceramics class, making something for herself. And she had liked it. She had liked it in a way that made coming back to work feel like putting on a coat that used to fit perfectly and noticing, for the first time, that it's slightly too tight across the shoulders. Nothing had changed. Everything was different. She started posting on the blog every Tuesday evening. She went to the ceramics class on Tuesdays because she had Tuesdays now, contractually, irrevocably, in writing. She signed up for the advanced session. She started experimenting with glazes. She made a bowl with a deep uneven blue glaze that looked different depending on the light, and she put it on the shelf in her apartment and looked at it every morning when she made coffee and felt something she was still learning to name. Jiho noticed the change in himself even later. He noticed it one afternoon when he was sitting at his desk doing absolutely nothing, which was not something he did, which was how he knew something was different. He was sitting at his desk doing nothing and looking at the locked drawer and thinking about the graph inside it and about the fact that he had spent 4 years tracking a change in a flavor profile and the answer had been smoked paprika and someone's grandmother's hot sauce, and he had somehow never once, in 4 years, asked the person who made it every day if she was doing okay. He sat with this information. It was not comfortable information. He sat with it anyway. 6 weeks after Mara came back, Dae-young walked into the office and reported that her ceramics class met every Tuesday and Thursday at a studio 3 blocks from her apartment. He placed this information on the desk with the expression of a man who knows exactly what is going to happen next and has already mentally started preparing for the consequences. Mr. Beck looked at the address. That will be all, Dae-young. Sir. Whatever you're thinking. That will be all. Dae-young left. Mr. Beck sat at his desk for 20 minutes. He picked up his phone. He put it down. He looked at the vase on his desk. She had brought it back to work one Wednesday, set it on the kitchen windowsill and said nothing about it, and he had moved it to his desk 3 days later when she wasn't looking, and she hadn't said anything about that either, and neither had he. He looked at the vase for a long time. Then he told his driver to take him to the ceramic studio. He enrolled in the class. Legitimately. He paid the fee. He signed the form. He arrived the following Tuesday in a suit that cost more than everything else in the room combined, sat down at a pottery wheel and waited. The door opened. Mara walked in. She stopped walking. No, I'm simply pursuing a hobby. Get out of my ceramics class. It isn't your ceramics class. I checked. Open enrollment. He said this with the precise, unruffled delivery of a man who has verified the terms and conditions and found them entirely in his favor. Mara looked at him. She looked at the suit. She looked at the wheel. She looked at Patrick, who was standing at the front of the room with the expression of a man who opened a ceramic studio because he loved ceramics and peace and is currently experiencing neither. Patrick, she said, did he sign the enrollment form? He did, Patrick said apologetically. Did he pay? He did. She turned back to Jiho. He looked back at her. Well, she said. Then she went to her wheel and sat down and did not look at him again. Or at least, she did not look at him in any way that could be observed, measured, or used as evidence. He made his first bowl. Collapsed immediately. He stared at the collapsed clay with the expression of a man encountering a category of experience for which he has no existing framework. He had never failed at something this completely and this physically before. The bowl had simply come apart, in his hands, while he was trying, without warning or negotiation or any of the signals he had learned to read in every other area of his life. He tried again, collapsed again. Third attempt. The clay hit the wheel base in a formless heap and he sat very still and looked at it. Mara, at the adjacent wheel, was working on a cylindrical vase with clean, even walls and was not looking at him. But she had slowed down slightly. Her hands were moving through the motions of centering the clay with the same steady attention she brought to everything, and she was not looking at him, but she was aware of him with the full peripheral awareness of someone who has spent 11 years tracking a person's presence in a room. Patrick came over and tried to help. He explained the technique gently, guiding, patient. Jiho listened. He implemented every correction exactly as instructed. He tried again. Collapsed. Outside the studio window, visible through the glass, two members of Jiho's security team stood on the pavement. They watched their boss, who had once made a rival cry with one eyebrow, get corrected by a man in a linen apron for the fourth time in 40 minutes. They exchanged a glance. Then they both looked very carefully at nothing. At the end of class, Jiho's station was a disaster. Clay everywhere, on the wheel, on the table, somehow on his jacket, on his left hand up to the wrist. 3 collapsed attempts sat in various states of collapse around him. Mara's station was clean. Her vase was centered, symmetrical, the walls even, the base solid. He looked at it. That's well made, he said. Mara was already standing, washing her hands at the sink. She was walking away. She had her bag over her shoulder. She was almost at the door. She stopped. She turned back. Your thumb placement is wrong, she said. That's why it keeps collapsing. You're gripping instead of guiding. The clay can feel the difference. She left before she could be annoyed at herself for saying it. He came back Thursday. His thumb placement was corrected. Mara noticed this the moment he sat down. He had practiced. Somewhere, between Tuesday and Thursday, Baek Jiho had practiced his thumb placement for a ceramics class. She did not know where. She did not ask. She filed it in the back of her mind with everything else she had filed about him over 11 years, in the folder she had never named but had been adding to since day 3. She did not think about it. She thought about it 6 more times before the class ended. What Mara noticed over the following weeks was this: he kept coming back. Every Tuesday, every Thursday, always the suit, always 12 minutes late, exactly 12, which she eventually concluded was deliberate. He got better, incrementally, measurably better, with the focused, almost grim determination of someone who has decided this is a problem to be solved and is applying to it the same strategic patience he applied to everything. He took notes, actual notes, in a small notebook about clay and technique in glaze chemistry, and he reviewed them between sessions, and this was the most baffling and somehow the most characteristic thing he had done in 11 years of being baffling and characteristic. What Jiho noticed was different. He noticed that she corrected his thumb placement without being asked. That she had been leaving when she said it and turned back anyway. He filed this in the unnamed folder. He opened it sometimes late at night at his desk and looked at what was in it without knowing what to call what he was doing. He noticed that she was last to leave every Tuesday. He was also last to leave every Tuesday. This had become, without discussion or acknowledgement, simply the order of things. Patrick always stayed. Patrick had started bringing an extra chair to the studio on Tuesdays and Thursdays, which nobody commented on. Then came the apology. The formal apology, the one from his legal team, issued on a Friday, containing the phrase, may have been perceived by some as, lasted approximately 4 minutes before his phone rang. This isn't an apology. It's a statement of regret. It says, and I am reading directly from the document you sent, the Billboard campaign, while well-intentioned, may have been perceived by some as. That is standard legal. May have been perceived by some. Jiho. She said his name and he went completely still. She had not said his actual name in 11 years. Always sir. Always Mr. Beck. This is a non-apology written by a lawyer and you know it and I know it and every single person who reads it knows it. A long pause. What would you like it to say? I would like it to say sorry, with a period at the end. Like a person. Silence. Long enough that she thought the call had dropped. Then, I'll have my team. Not your team. You. The silence this time was different. Not the silence of someone buying time. The silence of someone who has arrived at something that costs them something and is standing very still in front of it. I'll send you something, he said. 40 minutes later, a text. I should not have put up the billboard. I'm sorry. JH. That was it. No qualifications. No passive constructions. No carefully worded distancing from accountability. Just the fact and the apology and his initials, which was as close as he had ever come, in his adult life, to writing something entirely unprotected. Mara read it 3 times. She screenshotted it. She did not post it anywhere. She sent back, "Thank you and nothing else." He stared at those 2 words for 9 minutes. He knew this because he looked up at some point and checked the time, and it had been 9 minutes, and he put the phone in his pocket and went and sat in the kitchen. Her kitchen, technically always her kitchen, and was quiet. Dae-young appeared 10 minutes later with tea. Set it down. Left without a word. This was the most emotionally precise thing Dae-young had ever done. The tea was the right temperature. Of course it was. Then came the vase. The studio held a small end-of-session sale. Students displayed their work on long tables. Small folded cards with prices. The natural light coming through the studio skylights at 4 in the afternoon, making everything look warmer than it was. Mara had 3 pieces out. 2 smaller bowls, functional, clean. And the vase. The one she had been working on for 6 weeks. Deep uneven blue glaze that shifted between cobalt and something close to black depending on the angle. The walls even. The base solid. It was, and she knew this privately and did not say it to anyone, the best thing she had made. She had put it on the table by mistake. She had meant to set it aside. She had put down the 2 bowls and turned to get the vase to take it home, and then someone had asked her a question and she had answered it, and then Patrick had needed help with the table arrangement and she had helped, and when she finally turned back around, the vase was on the table and someone had put a red sticker on the base. Sold. She knew before she looked up. She looked up anyway. He was in the corner. Suit. Cup of tea. Looking at her the way you look at someone when you've been caught doing something you can't explain yet and you're deciding whether to explain it. She crossed the room. That's not for sale. There was a sticker. I put it out by mistake. It's not for sale. I've already purchased it. She stopped 2 feet from him. He did not step back. She noted this. Return it. I don't want to return it. Then I'll buy it back from you. I don't want to sell it back. She looked at him. He looked at her. And then she asked the question she should not have asked because it opened something she wasn't ready to open yet. Why do you want it? He looked at the vase. Then at her. The answer he gave was not the first one he thought of. Not the second. It was the third, which happened to be the true one. It's well made. She wanted to argue. She had the argument right there, ready to deliver. But she looked at him holding her vase. This thing she had made with her hands, that she loved for no reason she could explain cleanly, and something about the way he was holding it. Both hands. Careful. Like it was something that could be broken and he had already decided he would not break it. The argument went somewhere else. If you chip it, she said. I'll know. I'm aware. She walked away. He took the vase home and put it on his desk. Not a shelf. His desk. He moved the photo of his mother to make room. Dae-young saw this the next morning, said absolutely nothing, and opened a mental file he titled, privately, "Oh no, sir." He started adding to it immediately. The showcase was Patrick's moment, and Patrick had been preparing for it for 6 weeks with the focused, earnest energy of a man who takes ceramics very seriously and has, in the last several months, been somewhat distracted from taking ceramics seriously by the ongoing interpersonal drama unfolding at Wheels 3 and 4 every Tuesday and Thursday. He had fairy lights. He had wine, the good kind, not the cheap kind, because Patrick had standards. He had arranged the display tables with care, angling them to catch the afternoon light from the skylights. He had printed small folded cards for each student's work. He had, briefly, considered curating a playlist before deciding that was too much and then curating one anyway. He was, in other words, ready. Mara arrived early. She always arrived early. She had the bowl she'd been working on for 2 months, the one that had taken her 7 attempts to center correctly, that had a glaze she'd mixed herself, a warm amber that deepened to rust at the base. It was clean. The proportions were right. It was the best thing she'd made since the vase. She put it on the display table and felt something she had been too careful to feel for most of her adult life. Simple, uncomplicated pride. Not pride in something she'd done for someone else. Not the satisfaction of a task completed correctly. Just pride. In something she'd made. For no one. For herself. For the fact of having made it. She stood there for a moment and just let herself feel it. Then Jiho arrived. 12 minutes late. Suit. Clay ghost on the left sleeve that had been there for 6 weeks and that Patrick had stopped trying to mention. He set his piece on the table next to hers and stood back. It was a bowl. It was genuinely good. Competent. The walls were even, the base solid, the proportions reasonable. He had improved significantly over 12 weeks. He would never be as good as Mara. He knew this. She knew this. He knew she knew this, and he had made peace with it in the way he had made peace with the 3 other things in his life he'd accepted, which was quietly and completely and without discussion. Patrick got the microphone. He announced the Most Improved Student Award. He gave it to Jiho. Mara's face did something complicated. Something that moved through several distinct expressions in about 2 seconds. Surprise, calculation, a flash of something she immediately put away, before settling into the composed, readable as neutral expression she wore when she was deciding how to feel about something. Jiho took the certificate. He looked uncomfortable. He did not smile for the photograph, which was normal for him. Photographs of Jiho smiling did not exist, but he also looked sideways at Mara's bowl during the photograph. Not at the camera. At her bowl. Patrick, who had been watching these 2 people for 12 weeks with the increasingly anxious fascination of someone who has stumbled into a story that is not theirs and cannot leave, captured this. He would put the photo in a drawer later. Too private to display. Too true to throw away. After the photograph, Jiho walked directly to her display table and looked at the bowl. Yours is better. Mara had been prepared for many things. She had not been prepared for that, delivered with that particular flatness that meant he meant it completely. I know, she said. I would have given you the award. It's a ceramic certificate, not a Nobel Prize. You worked harder than I did. She looked at him. He was looking at her bowl with the expression she had catalogued dozens of times over the years, the expression he wore when he was in the presence of something he respected and could not fully explain. She had seen it aimed at operational plans. At a particularly well-executed negotiation. At the city view from his office window at certain times of day. She had been careful, for a while now, not to think about the other times she had seen it. Jiho. He looked up. Why are you still coming to this class? It wasn't entirely a question. The way she said it, the weight she put on still. He heard it correctly. He heard what she was actually asking. The room around them had gotten very quiet. Patrick was 4 feet away pretending to adjust fairy lights he had already adjusted. He was absolutely listening. Jiho straightened his cuffs. Mara watched him do it. She had catalogued this gesture too. Every version of it. The quick adjustment when he was irritated. The slow adjustment when he was buying time. This one was the slow version. This one meant, I am standing at the edge of something and I am deciding whether to jump. I find it. If you say meditative, she said, I will pour this wine on your suit. He closed his mouth. She waited. He looked at her with the expression of a man who has been building toward something for months and has arrived at the edge of it and discovered, only now, that the architect forgot to put a door in the wall. His phone rang. Dae-young. The timing was so cosmically, catastrophically perfect that for a moment nobody in the room moved. Jiho looked at the screen. Looked at Mara. Something had shifted in her expression. Not hurt, not quite, but close enough to hurt that he saw it and felt it like something physical. He declined the call. Dae-young called again. Jiho looked at the phone. Looked at her. She was watching him with the careful, composed expression she wore when she had already decided what was going to happen and was simply waiting for it to happen. I have to. Go, she said, perfectly even. It's fine. It was very clearly not fine. They both knew it was not fine. The fact that she said it was fine so completely, so without tremor, was the thing that made it most clearly not fine. He had known her for 11 years. He knew the difference between Mara being fine and Mara performing fine for the benefit of a situation she had already decided how to handle. He went. The situation turned out to be operational. Something that needed managing. He managed it with the efficient, focused competence he applied to everything, and it took 45 minutes, and then he got back in the car and told his driver to go back to the studio. The fairy lights were still on. Patrick was stacking chairs. The display tables were half cleared. The wine was mostly gone. Mara was not there. He stood in the doorway of the studio and looked at the empty room. At the display table. At the space where her bowl had been, the amber glaze bowl, the best thing she'd made. She had taken it with her. Patrick. She left about 20 minutes ago. Patrick set down a chair. He looked at Jiho with the gentleness of a man who has seen this scene before, in different forms, many times. She took her bowl. Jiho nodded. He looked at the empty space on the table. Patrick. Yes. Did I? He made a small gesture at the empty room. The fairy lights. The cleared tables. The space where she had been. Patrick picked up the last chair. Set it down. Yeah, he said quietly. A little bit. Jiho went home. He sat on his very expensive couch in his very quiet apartment and did not turn on any lights. He sat in the dark and looked at the vase on his desk. Her vase, the deep blue one, the one he had bought because it was well made and because he had not been ready yet to say what he actually meant by that, and he thought about 11 years. About a woman who had made his house run with such complete, invisible competence that he had never once had to think about it. Who had improved his soup without telling him because she noticed it could be better and she had the means to make it better and that was simply what she did. Who had spent 11 years being the most relied upon person in every room and had never once been asked what she wanted. He thought about the graph in the drawer. He thought about the way she'd said Jiho on the phone, the night of the apology text. The first time she had used his name in 11 years. What it had done to him. How completely unprepared he had been for it and how he had not yet fully recovered. He called Dae-young. I need you to help me do something. Dae-young, with the weariness of a man who has been helpful for 12 years and is calculating how many more years of helpfulness he has in reserve. Is it a billboard? It is not a billboard. Are you absolutely sure? Because last time, Dae-young, are you sure? It is not a billboard. Pause. What is it? I'm going to cook something. Silence on the line. A longer silence than the billboard question had produced. Sir, I need you to help me not burn the kitchen down. Sir. The last time you cooked you described it as a learning experience and threw the pan away. I know. You burned water. I know. I'm keeping the pan this time. Another pause. Dae-young had, over 12 years, developed a precise taxonomy of Mr. Beck's silences. This one was new. This one had something in it he didn't have a category for. Something that was not strategic and was not controlled and was not the carefully maintained composure of a man who had decided 12 years ago that being okay was the only available option. I'll be there in 20 minutes, Dae-young said. Outside, rain had started. Small rain. The kind that doesn't make any noise but covers everything. Jiho stood at his kitchen window and looked at the rain and thought about the ceramics class, about all those collapsed bowls, about learning that failure is not the end of the object. You just start again. You adjust your thumbs. You try differently. He had tried to say it tonight. He had tried and his phone rang and he had gone. He was going to try again. This time he was keeping the pan. The cooking took 3 hours and produced one minor kitchen fire, which Dae-young handled with the practiced calm of a man who has handled significantly worse and considers a small stovetop fire essentially a paperwork-free afternoon. Jiho made doenjang jjigae. Not her jjigae, his, the one closest to something he remembered from a long time ago, from a kitchen he had not thought about in years, from a time before he was responsible for everything. His mother's recipe, reconstructed from memory and 3 phone calls to an aunt who was delighted to hear from him and asked too many follow-up questions. He made it twice. The first attempt was wrong in ways he couldn't articulate. The second was better. He tasted it for 40 minutes, adjusting, and at some point stopped being able to tell if it was good because he had tasted it too many times and his palate had given up. Is this good? He asked Dae-young. Dae-young tasted it. It's good, sir. Genuinely good or, I'm not losing my job good. Genuinely good. It tastes like you meant it. Jiho looked at the pot for a moment. Get the car. Dae-young drove, parked outside Mara's building, turned off the engine, looked in the rearview mirror at Mr. Beck sitting in the back seat in his suit holding a container of soup with both hands. Okay, Dae-young said. Jiho looked at the building. Sir, you've been sitting there for 6 minutes. I'm aware. Just go up. Ring the bell. Say the thing. I'm going to. You've been going to for 6 minutes. Jiho looked at the building for 2 more minutes. Then he opened the door and got out and walked to the entrance and pressed the bell and waited. Footsteps inside. The door opened. Mara stood in the doorway in a paint-stained sweatshirt, hair up, the expression of someone who was not expecting company and is processing the identity of the company they have received. She looked at him, looked at the container, looked at his hands around the container, back at his face. Is that Dunjang Jigi? You made Dunjang Jigi. Yes, you made it. Mara. Jiho. The last time you cooked something you called it a learning experience and threw the pan away. I kept the pan this time. She was trying not to smile. He could see the effort of it. And he found the effort of it, the specific, visible fight between what she was feeling and what she had decided to show. So completely unbearable and so completely wonderful that something in him that had been waiting 12 years simply stopped waiting. He said everything before his brain could convene a committee and review the decision. I came to that ceramics class every week for 4 months because it was the only place I could think of where you might eventually talk to me again. And I bought your vase because it is the best thing I have seen anyone make with their hands. And I'm sorry about the billboard, the real sorry, not the lawyer sorry. I know the difference and so do you. And I made this jiggy because I wanted to make you something for once instead of the other way around. And it took 3 attempts and 1 fire. And I think it's good, but I genuinely cannot tell anymore because I've been tasting it for 2 hours and I've lost all objectivity. He stopped. He had said more words about his feelings consecutively than he had said in his entire adult life. He was aware of this. His face was doing something unfamiliar, something that felt new and somewhat exposed and that he could not regulate back to neutral the way he usually could. Mara was very still. She was looking at him with the full, quiet attention she reserved for things that mattered, the kind of attention that felt like being seen clearly and carefully from a very close distance. From the car, barely audible. The sound of a window rolling down approximately 2 inches. And I would like, Jiho finished quietly, to come inside, if that's all right. Silence. Mara looked at him, at his suit, which was still impeccable at 9 in the evening after 3 hours of cooking and 1 fire, at the container in his hands, both hands careful the way he had held her vase, at his face which was doing the unfamiliar thing and not hiding it. Did Daeyoung help you cook that? Absolutely not. Jiho. He was present in a supervisory capacity. He did not touch the pot. From the car, just barely carrying across the pavement, I touched the pot once. And Mara laughed. The real one. Sudden and completely unguarded and loud enough to fill the doorway and carry down the quiet street. And Jiho looked at it the way you look at something you have wanted for a long time and are only now understanding how much you wanted. Come inside, she said. Both of you. There's rice. Daeyoung ate 3 bowls of rice with the unhurried dignity of a man who has spent 12 years managing other people's crises and has absolutely earned this meal. He excused himself at 10 o'clock with a small nod to Mara and a look at Mr. Beck that communicated, without words, everything that needed to be communicated. Then he left and pulled the door mostly closed behind him and sat in the car and did not drive anywhere for a while. Inside, it was just the 2 of them. Mara's small kitchen table. The jigi between them. Her bowls on the shelf, the amber one, the best one, the one she'd brought home from the showcase. The apartment quiet. The street outside quiet. Everything down to its essential components. She tasted the soup. She was quiet for a moment. Well, it's good. How good? I need a calibration. On a scale from, it's really good. She looked at him across the table. It tastes like you meant it. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. She had always been able to read him. She had been reading him for 11 years, filing everything, building the most accurate and complete understanding of a person she had ever built of anyone. And what she was reading right now was so unguarded and uncomplicated and entirely true that something permanent shifted in whatever she had been maintaining since the showcase. I should tell you something, she said. Okay. The jigi. The one you've been chasing for 4 years. She paused. It was smoked paprika and my grandmother's hot sauce. He stared at her. The stare went on long enough to have several distinct phases. Phase 1, processing. Phase 2, recalculation. Phase 3, the dawning, comprehensive understanding of 4 years of investigation. 47 notebook entries, $300 of groceries, one grown man crying in his kitchen, and a locked drawer. That's it, he said. That's it. I had my entire... He stopped, put his fingers to his forehead, looked at the ceiling. Mara, you called me into your office with a graph. He looked at her. She was grinning now, the laugh barely contained, right at the surface. You let me do that. You had a timeline, and the laugh came out, sudden and loud and filling her small kitchen, her real laugh, the one that startled people, and Baek Ji-ho, feared crime lord, owner of 17 dry cleaning businesses, man who had once made a rival cry with a single eyebrow, watched Mara Washington laugh at his expense and felt something in his chest unlock that he had not known was locked. He smiled. The real one. The one nobody in his organization had ever seen. It looked like a word in a language he had just started learning. It transformed his face into something entirely different from the composed, controlled architecture he presented to the world. Something younger and less careful and more true. It was quietly devastating. For years, he said, still smiling. The paprika. Your head of security cried harder than your consigliere. How do you know about... He stopped. You knew everything, didn't you? I always know everything. He looked at her across the small table in the small kitchen with the jjigae going cold between them and the bowls on the shelf and the quiet street outside and said, without straightening his cuffs, without calling anyone, without building any structure around it at all. I like you very much. Mara looked at him. He had said it like a person. Complete sentence. No qualifications. No exit built into the wording. Just the true thing stated plainly. I know, she said. That's not. You're supposed to. I like you very much too. She picked up her spoon. Eat your jjigae before it gets cold. He ate his jjigae. She ate hers. Their knees were touching under the table. Neither of them moved away. Outside, Dae-young sent one text to the group chat. Every senior member of the organization, the consigliere, the head of security, Young-soo, everyone who had cried over a recipe. It's handled. The head of security sent 3 crying emojis without a single second of hesitation. The consigliere sent a voice note that was 4 seconds of slow exhaling. Someone sent a prayer hands. Someone else sent a chef's kiss. Young-soo, who had been the first to notice the wrong soup on that Wednesday, sent nothing for 30 seconds and then sent. Finally, Dae-young put his phone in his pocket, closed his eyes, thought about Jeju, about sleeping 11 hours, about eating food that someone other than Mara had cooked. The weeks that followed settled into something that had no name but felt right. Mara's kitchen stayed hers, her rules, her domain, the point at the door without turning around, the immediate departure, the return in 10 minutes for soup at 1 o'clock. But the table was different now. He sat at it. They talked about nothing important and everything was ordinary and specific and exactly right. The ceramics class continued. Tuesdays and Thursdays. He kept coming. He made a bowl that took 8 attempts, and on the 8th it held, and he put it on his desk next to the vase, and Patrick saw this and said nothing and charged him for studio time, and Mr. Beck paid without complaint. And this was how Patrick knew things were going to be all right. The consigliere kept the notebook. Page 48 blank. Felt like a record of something. He kept it anyway. The head of security made the cornbread 31 times. It was good. It was not the point. He made it anyway. The low-level guy married his Trinidadian girlfriend. Nobody was entirely surprised. Dae-young took his week off. Slept 11 hours the first night. Woke up feeling like a different person. Sent one text to Mr. Beck. Enjoying my week off, sir. For hours later, good. Dae-young considered this effusive. He was right to. The last scene is the one from the beginning. Mara in the kitchen, stirring the pot. Ji-ho in the doorway. She points at the door without turning around. He leaves immediately. But you understand it differently now. She points at the door because this is her kitchen and her rules and her domain, and he leaves because he understands that, because leaving is his way of saying, this is yours, I know it's yours, I am not here to take anything from you, I never was. He will be back in 10 minutes. She knows this. The soup will be ready at 1. She stirred the pot. He left. The door didn't quite close all the way. Neither of them fixed it. And here is what this story is really about, underneath the billboard and the graph and the collapsed bowls and the soup. It is about the difference between being relied upon and being known. Mara spent 11 years being extraordinary at things and invisible as a person, and the bravest thing she ever did was make a lopsided bowl on a Tuesday and decide that it mattered. It is about control as a substitute for vulnerability, how Jiho built an entire empire rather than learn to say, I need something, and how a ceramics will taught him, physically in his hands, that you cannot control clay, that the bowl collapses if you grip instead of guide, and that the best things are made by people who learn the difference. It is about paying attention as the purest form of love, about a graph in a locked drawer that was the most romantic and the most broken thing a person had ever done, and about a woman who corrected a man's thumb placement without being asked because she cannot watch a fixable problem go unfixed, and about how both of those things were love, expressed in the only languages they knew before they found better ones. And it is about doors left open, about the shape that only reveals itself if you stay at the wheel, about the thing you make by accident that turns out to be exactly what you needed. Thank you for staying until the end of this story. If something in it landed, if you laughed somewhere and then felt something you weren't expecting, if you recognized yourself in the graph or the lopsided bowl or the soup made on the third attempt after one kitchen fire, that is exactly what this story was built for. Drop a comment. Tell us which moment got you. Tell us if you're a Mara or a Jiho, and whether your answer changed by the end. Subscribe if you haven't. Every story here is built like this one. Something true underneath. The next one is coming. The door is open. Pot of food.